Imagine a stone chamber lit only by flickering torches. The stench of sweat, iron, and blood hangs thick in the air. In the center stands a device so cruel that even hardened soldiers look away. A man is bound screaming, while a wooden frame creaks under his weight. This is not legend. This is not myth. These are the instruments that once turned justice into pure theater of suffering. Tonight we step into the darkest corners of medieval justice. We will uncover the most horrifying torture devices that actually existed. And we will see how fear was sharpened into steel and wood to keep power alive. In medieval Europe, law was not only about order. It was about spectacle. Punishment was public power staged as fear and agony. Picture the rack. A simple wooden frame stretched with ropes and rollers. The victim tied hand and foot slowly pulled until joints cracked. Each turn of the handle, another scream echoing off the walls. Guards tightened it not in haste, but in rhythm, dragging out the moment. The creak of rope became the soundtrack of terror. Hear the ropes grinding against timber. Hear the wet snap of muscle fibers tearing. Smell the sweat dripping on cold stone. Smell the metallic tang of blood mingling with smoke from torches. Feel the air shiver each time the prisoner shrieks. But what if the rack was only the beginning? What if there were devices designed not to kill quickly, but to stretch pain into hours, days, even weeks? Could you endure a chair made entirely of iron spikes waiting cold against your skin? From the prisoner, the spiked chair was an embrace of endless needles. From the executioner, it was a tool of patience forcing confessions drip by drip. From the crowd, it was theater, each cry a spectacle. Every angle showed a different truth, and none of them merciful. Yet the spiked chair was tame compared to what lurked in secret chambers. There were tools that promised not just pain, but transformation of flesh into horror. Something darker waited just beyond the door. Then came the pair of anguish. A small iron device shaped like fruit. It was forced into the mouth, or worse, into other openings. A screw at the top widened the iron leaves, tearing flesh apart from inside. Not visible to the crowd, but far more intimate than the rack. Pain blooming inward, unseen, yet unbearable. Some historians whisper that the pair was never widely used. That perhaps it was more symbol than reality. But others swear that nobles kept it hidden for private punishments far from public eyes. Was it a weapon of myth, or a secret truth of chambers never written about? Imagine the victim bound, gagged, eyes wide, as the device was shown to them. Terror was not only in the pain, but in the anticipation. In the helpless wait for iron to bloom inside their body. Hope vanished before the screw even turned. While such horrors unfolded in dungeons above the streets of Europe, bustled with markets, laughter, and bells. Children played near fountains. Merchants haggled over spices. Life and death coexisted, separated only by a stone wall. But if iron pears and spiked chairs could crush the spirit, what came next would shatter the body beyond repair. What was the device shaped like a coffin, yet meant not to protect the dead, but to destroy the living? The Iron Maiden was a towering coffin forged from steel. Its doors studded with cruel spikes facing inward. At first glance, it looked like a sarcophagus carved for a queen. But when the doors closed, the body inside was pierced not fatally but slowly. The victim stood upright, bleeding in dozens of wounds, yet alive long enough to scream. Every shift of weight pushed fresh metal deeper into flesh. A tomb that sang with agony. Imagine the clang of the steel doors shutting. The echo booming like thunder in a stone vault. The hiss of blood dripping onto cold iron. The muffled gasps growing faint as the victim realized there was no escape. Smell the rank mix of rust and blood fused into one suffocating stench. But was the Iron Maiden ever real, or was it a nightmare invented centuries later? Some claim it was a theatrical invention of the 19th century, used to terrify the imagination of tourists. Others argue that fragments of spiked coffins prove it once stood in medieval chambers. So was it real flesh or only folklore sharpened into iron? Think of the crowd pressed against the square outside a fortress. They could not see into the chambers, but they heard the faint muffled cries. For them it was enough. The imagination did more than sight. Rumors spread faster than screams, and soon the Iron Maiden became a legend of dread whispered across Europe. But the maiden was only half the story. Some devices did not wait for chambers or execution. They crawled with the living weight of nature itself. The whispers spoke of cages and rats of fire and crawling jaws of hunger. In some dungeons, a rat was pressed against the stomach of a prisoner. A metal bucket placed over it. The executioner heated the bucket with flame. Driven by terror, the rat burrowed into the only escape route. Through flesh, muscle, and bone. The scream of the victim mixed with the squeal of the animal. A punishment that weaponized hunger itself. Some argue this device was more a tale of conquistadors than medieval Europe. Yet chronicles in both East and West mention the use of animals as instruments of agony. Whether myth or memory, the image of claws digging into living flesh was enough to haunt centuries of nightmares. Picture the prisoner bound, watching the rat twitch inside the bucket, knowing what would come yet powerless to stop it. Every heartbeat a countdown to the moment when claws would pierce skin. Hope dissolved into raw terror long before flesh broke. And still outside monasteries rang with bells. Fields glowed with harvest sunlight. Families feasted at wooden tables. The distance between peace and torment could be measured in a single wall's thickness. But what of the device that turned the human body into a canvas of shattered bones? What of the wheel? A massive cartwheel where limbs were stretched, tied, and broken with hammers. Was this not the ultimate theater of destruction? The condemned was strapped across the wooden spokes, each limb shattered by iron clubs. Bone by bone splintered until the body hung twisted like broken branches. Some victims left alive tied to the wheel, for days birds pecking at their flesh. The wheel stood as both execution and display, a monument of terror visible for miles. If the wheel shattered the body, and the pair shattered the spirit, what remains to be broken? The answer lay in devices that crushed identity itself. Not only torture of flesh, but the destruction of who a person was meant to be. Among the darkest tools were the masks of shame. Iron visages forged into grotesque faces, with long noses shaped like swine or bird beaks. These were not designed to pierce flesh, but to strip dignity. The condemned was forced to wear them in streets mocked, spat upon, beaten. A slow torture of humiliation grinding the soul, until even death seemed a relief. But some masks carried hidden spikes pressing into skin, cutting lips, or tearing tongue if the wearer spoke. It was silence enforced by steel. Here cruelty was not only physical, it was the annihilation of humanity itself. When we look at these devices, we see more than metal and wood. We see a world where justice and cruelty intertwined, where fear became currency and suffering was public theater. And though centuries separate us, the echoes of those screams still rattle through stone corridors and through our own imagination. The question lingers: if civilization once forged such instruments in the name of order, what are we capable of forging today? But if you thought medieval torture was cruel, wait until you hear about the executions staged as public festivals, where pain became celebration. The past is a mirror cracked and blood-stained. It shows us both the heights of human creation and the depths of human cruelty. To walk away from these chambers is to carry the weight of their silence and their screams. Remember this darkness, for it was real and it was human. If this journey through the dungeons of history gripped you, leave a like, so others can uncover it too. Share this with those who believe the past was only noble and glorious. And tell us in the comments which device chilled you the most. Your voice keeps these stories alive, and your curiosity lights the path to our next descent into history's shadows.